Speaking of reliability, a podcast with good friends talking with you about reliability engineering topics. Welcome to Speaking of Reliability. This is Fred Schenkelberg.
And this is Dianna Dini.
Hey, Dianna, good talking to you again. It's been a little while. I'm glad we got some time to chat.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I just recognized that we've been chatting, catching up for 40 minutes. And I thought, we should hit record.
It happens.
It happens. And we were chatting about a variety of things. And one of the comments I wanted to, say, wait a second here. We were talking about how do you get groups to, talk and open up. And we were talking about reliability stuff, quality stuff. A lot of people are concerned about non-disclosure agreements or trade secrets. And so bringing groups together from different organizations, they kind of are a little more cautious in general.
Right.
But that led to a comment that you made is that it's a lot easier when you're all in the same team working for the same problem, trying to solve the same thing. You're in the same company. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second there. The software folks sit way over there in the dark corner of the building, and we don't really know who they are or what they really do. There's lots of pizza boxes over there, but that's about all we know about them. And we don't talk to them.
Or, if there's a problem that shows up and nobody knows who to go to get an answer. Mm-hmm. Or to make a decision about it.
Yeah. And they just either table it, or if you got a good fracas system, it might get routed to somebody that knows. I remember it was on a team that, the mechanical engineers and electrical engineers both had different views of the world. Imagine that. And one of the products, in order for it to not radiate a bunch of unwanted emissions, this, not ESD, EMD, electromechanical, I don't know what it's called, the radiated stuff. And so some products, because of the frequencies or whatever, become like radios. They send out all kinds of weird signals and interfere with other things. So that you'd have to shield it according to the US way of dealing with this stuff. And the mechanical engineers wanted to put a shield in the case that would assume the circuit boards were always the same size, like thickness and where things were located on the board and things like that.
This sounds like a familiar scenario.
Yeah. and the electrical engineers are like, well, it's kind of over here in the middle of the board, but depending on the solder and how it gets lined and how big the leads are on that actual component, these are not precise mechanical devices.
Wires.
Yeah. And so they were trying to mate the seal that was part heat dispersion, but also had to do with containing this radiation that would be coming out of it. Think of like a Faraday cage, but it had to be the right place. And they just could not, they just were talking complete different languages. And so I got called in and said, all right, what's your issue here? What's your issue here? Okay. I think I get it. And then it was basically just translated it from one discipline to the other discipline and back and forth.
Now, were you part of the company or were you brought in external? Yeah. Okay.
No, I was a manufacturing engineer at the time. And I was like, we can't make that to that precision. And we can't, it's not going to work. When we went and tested it, it doesn't work. But they wouldn't talk to each other, these two people. And so I said, all right, you two, let's get together. We had a circuit board sitting there and I explained the issues I was seeing. And then they both explained their positions and they just looked at each other like they were aliens. What do you mean it's different dimensions? What do you mean it has to be that close? And so I played the role of a translator. Mm-hmm. That's all I did. And they go, oh, okay. And then 2 minutes later they had a solution and we're done. And it worked. But they talked past each other most of the time. And part of it was different language and part of it was just a different view of the world, of the way they go about solving problems. Because the electrical guys really didn't care very much whatsoever about mechanical stuff because it was soldered and I guess in handhelds, you got to care about how high the device is and how big it is, how much space it takes. But this was a great big box. It was like a computer box. So there's plenty of space. They didn't care.
It's, I know that's the way it is, which sometimes baffles me because even when you're designing a different part of a component or a system, I mean, it's got to fit in with other things, and other people are designing those other things. Mm-hmm. So they're your customers of a sort, and you're kind of co-customers in this case. But I mean, you gotta work it out. So, well, it was a good thing you were there to get them to facilitate and ask some questions.
Well, we weren't going to be able to build it. The yield on it would have been abysmal if it even worked. And so it was like, we got to solve this. And it led to being the role that I had at the time was a design for manufacturing engineer. And so I was kind of always bringing my colleagues in the design team bad news. No, we can't build that. You can't do that. Our machines aren't capable of doing that. And they said, why don't you ever bring us solutions? They stopped inviting me to one-on-one meetings and stuff like that. But the project manager recognized that I was the only other person besides him that had to deal with everything from marketing to procurement to all the different design teams. And he had a staff, and they all had managers. And so the mechanical engineering manager had like 10 mechanical engineers working for him. And the electrical engineering manager had 15 or so engineers working for him. The software one, like I said, nobody knows what they were doing, but there was a bunch of them over there in the dark corner.
Doing something.
And
nefarious.
And, I got to work in the lab. I did failure analysis stuff and all these other things. But vast majority of the time, I felt like I was bridging the gap between these different silos and in pulling teams together, and which I couldn't solve. I didn't have the capability to create solutions for these problems. But I felt like that quintessential quality person that said, this isn't working. I don't know how to solve it, but if you three get together and let's do a fishbone diagram or some basic exercise so that we all understand exactly what we're dealing with here. And then they go, oh, that's easy. And, end of the hour, it's done and it's solved. Why they couldn't walk out. And I had some ideas of why silos exist, but here we're all sitting in one big building. It wasn't like we didn't know each other. Everybody knew each other's, where their kids went to school and all that other stuff. But each team had their own set of tools, their own objectives, their own deadlines, their own milestones, their own boss telling them what to do. And their boss rarely ever said, hey, you need to go talk to the electrical people.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they always, I don't know, there's been a couple different setups that I've seen where people sit too. So it could be that all the software people are together in a corner over here, and then all the mechanical are over here, and then the manufacturing are just, and they're kind of grouped by manager.
Yep.
But then when you get these, sometimes I've seen it where it's been like product development manager, and then the cross-functional team is sitting together around each other. So they're not in their own different team. They're all kind of sitting together. But then I guess that gets complicated if you change a project and then you got to move desks. That'd be a pain.
Well, I mean, we were in cubicles, so it was easy enough to move. One of the things that Hewlett-Packard did that I thought was brilliant is that the mechanical engineers, every one of their offices were for two people. So they were like a double-size cubicle and had two desks in it. And there was the mechanical design engineer was there, and there was the production or the assembly engineer, the manufacturing engineer for that assembly was there. And so while they're designing the part and the mechanism or whatever the mechanical thing is, and this is for an inkjet printer, so there's lots of mechanical bits and bobs in it, the assembly engineer is lockstep with them and simultaneously building the tools and equipment and robotic stuff to actually build it. And so they were designing how to assemble it as they were designing it. And most of the time, you didn't know which one was the designer and which one was the production person because they always were together. They're bonded, basically. And it made going to assembly easy. Yes, you're thinking Siamese twins or something like that. But they were always, if you got a meeting with one of them, both show up. Yeah, they'd always show up. And they would. But I kind of got the sense, and the electrical folks didn't do that, and I don't know what the software people did, but these two were. It was always a trade-off. How are we going to build this? Is this the right solution? And they both understood that it's designing it as a design constraint, and the people often switched roles over project to project. They would follow their own project into production, and then they would come back to the next team as the production engineer, and then they'd pair up with a new design engineer, and then it was a great way to get design for assembly just baked into the product right from the start. And it was high volume and lots of mechanical parts, so it had to be assemblable.
So was that something that the project managers had set up that or was this something that the people decided to do for each other?
I don't know where it started or how it started. It was just the way it was when I got there. Yet the electrical folks were on one row of the same floor, but they were all in their own area kind of thing. And they used different tools and everything else. And that was who my primary contact was, because I was designed for reliability or designed for manufacturing, but for the circuit board. So I got in my office was on the floor where we had all the equipment. We would actually do production. And we had prototype lines and stuff like that. But we lived on the production floor, and then we'd walk upstairs to where the nice, quiet offices were.
Right.
And Ed, who was an electrical engineer I was working with, he goes, he'd look at me as I darken his doorway, and he'd go, "Oh, another drive-by shooting. What? What problem do you have today?"
When I worked, they called them seagulls because they swoop in, make a mess, and then they leave.
Yeah, that would fit too. But I tried to make things better and stuff. Yet I found the siloing, and it wasn't just in the design team. And but I see that over and over again and now that, the software's in Europe someplace, and the mechanical folks are in Australia, and the electrical folks are in Norway, and the project managers in Denver, and like, how in the world do they make that work?
Yeah, a lot of intentional effort.
Yeah, it really does. And it takes the team really recognizing they got to put in the effort to make sure that all this stuff gets coordinated. Otherwise, you really do end up with a mess. But there's silos also in finance and marketing and procurement. And
yeah. So, there was a project where there was a product that had been on the market, and it worked well. But things change over time. There's new things, new other equipment, and new techniques that come into play that, you have to update things and change them. Or
even sometimes parts get obsolete and you have to find a replacement for it.
Yeah.
So
and there's just there were all these questions about, well, how do people do this now? And has it changed? And why did we make that decision 6 years ago to change this material and all that? And it was, and I was a quality engineering type on the project at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, let's just get everybody together here. And we had to coordinate. We got somebody in from the field that was a field trainer, technician, and expert. Got them in, got the manufacturing and design people in, and just tried to facilitate some of these discussions. Now, I used risk management and quality tools to help facilitate these discussions, to get everybody talking. But once we all got together and started talking about these common problems, then it kind of all came out. And we got answers. We had threads that we needed to pull to find more answers.
Yeah.
But in the process of all that, I met somebody in marketing, and he was a young guy, but I say, if I needed to find this information about what's going on in the field with competitive products or something, is there anybody in the company I could look for? Sue told me to talk to Janice, and Janice told me to talk to Mark, and then Mark told me to talk to this guy. We'll call him Dave. And I finally reached out to Dave, and he'd been working in marketing for a couple of years. He said, oh, yeah, I do these kind of reports. And he's like, well, I'm not sure what you need, and back and forth. And then he shared with me like the reports that he would put together. He would spend hours collecting field information and summarizing them in these reports. And then they would get filed or used by marketing.
And you're looking at it, this is gold.
Yeah, it was super gold. And he said, oh, I didn't even think that, I just make these reports because I'm supposed to. And it would be really great if somebody used the information. Like, yeah, it would.
It would be. Which might have been the original intent way back when they started doing it. And
and then it just became something that they did. And I don't know, but there was a big disconnect between, the people getting the information and the people that could use it. And there were, I think it was because of the silos that every manager is sort of managing their turf and their players. And I don't know the broader picture. Sometimes it's somebody that's like you were the facilitator for the different groups, or I was working in quality. So I was looking across different functions for quality purposes, but it does take somebody to purposely look and ask.
Yeah, cross the boundaries and not worry about it. I had one client that I was doing an assessment saying, figuring out what they do for their reliability program and how do they make decisions? How's this all work? And one of the things I heard from the design team over and over again is they got very little information about what's failing in the field. Well, that's kind of useful information if you're trying to improve a design and you don't know, there's too many failures and that's the only information you get, but you're not getting anything about what failed.
Yeah, that stinks.
Yeah. And they were in the same building. The repair center was in their building. And it ended up that the vice president in charge of field service and field repairs, the repair service, was under the mission of, I have to do the repairs very fast. These are expensive devices and I want to get them back to the customer working order as fast as possible. So they took great pride in bringing in a failed product, diagnosing it, repairing it, qualifying that it's working within a couple of hours and get it back on the truck before it leaves the dock, basically. He was amazingly quick at turning it around. But in the meantime, what they basically did is tore all the guts out, replaced everything and with brand new stuff, and then put it back together in a box and sent it to them. And so you can imagine that they have this huge pile of parts that they took out and very little diagnostic information. They said, oh, it doesn't turn on. All right, we're going to change the motherboard, the power supply, blah, blah, blah. Oh, it's got this problem. All right, we're going to change these 8 parts without any investigation as to any root cause analysis whatsoever. And so the design team is saying, yeah, they have buckets of parts, but most of them work. And there's no information about what the symptom was that caused them to replace these 10 things. And they didn't keep track of records. Record keeping was a hindrance to their mission of turn it around fast. And so I sat down with this VP and I was like, why are you focusing on it? Wouldn't it make a whole lot more sense for you and your organization if you actually designed a product that did not fail? Do you think your customer satisfaction would go up if they didn't have to send you their device every 6 weeks to get repaired? Kind of thing.
Yeah, it all comes back to what you're measured on.
Right. And he was, that was what his charter was. And he was in a position in the company where he could write his own charter. And I said, well, why do you do what you're doing? He says, it's good for the customer. They get their product back and I get more employees. And last year I got enough headcount under me that I got promoted to vice president. And now I have all these extra perks. And it was really about the status of his department being that large.
Oh, that's the worst.
I just about blew up in his face. And the poor guy that was hosting me was tracking me around to meeting all these people and sitting there. And he came out and he goes, "What did you do? You just called him an idiot." And I says, "Yeah." And it was pretty much literally called him an idiot. And he thought, there's no way they're ever going to work with us. And blah, 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 blah. And I said, that guy needed a slap in the face with a wet mackerel. And so I was not shy about doing that. I dressed him down. It was like, "Are you an absolute idiot?" And so about 3 days later, I get a call from the folks that hired me to come in and do this assessment and saying, "I don't know what you said to him or how it, what happened, but he walked over here and asked what we needed." He's hired a statistician. He's opening up a failure analysis lab, and he's going to find the information we need so we can design better products. And I'm like, I think I'll follow my gut next time and yell at him again. It's like, I was just livid. I couldn't believe it. Here's you're successful, but you're absolutely just screwing the rest of the organization. They're frustrated. They have lack of information. They want to do a good job too. You're really hurting and I was told that their market share was diminishing, and the design team was trying to figure out, was it feature related? Was it that? And I goes, no, they just don't work. And they were blind to a lot of the details they needed. And that's infuriating. And that's kind of, I'm working with a new client right now, and she says, "Well, how do I get started?" Well, call 8 people across your organization, some design team, some manufacturing, some quality, procurement, marketing. Spend an hour with them. Ask them a bunch of questions about what they do and how it interrelates with the product's reliability and quality decisions. Just go talk to them. You will learn so much that nobody else in the organization knows.
Yeah, that's what's going on. Similarly, for me, helping somebody is that they don't know who does what, except everybody is within their own realm of things. That they really need to figure out who does what and when and how things happen. Mm-hmm. I mean, things are happening. People do things, and things will get done, but maybe it could be better. Maybe that's the quality engineer in me, the continuous improvement thing. I don't know.
Well, I learned that in the manufacturing line, is that if I'm, going from one piece of equipment to the next, if there's a problem, just walk upstream and say, "Hey, how come there's burrs on this edge? Why don't we fix that?" And so that I don't rip my hands open every time I touch this thing. And it was very personal that way. You could see the person at the stage in front of you, and you could go talk to him directly. Yet when it became between different departments in the organization, you just can't be shy.
No.
You can meet somebody randomly in the cafeteria and say, "What are you working on?" And says, "Oh, I'm working on the same project. What part are you working on?" And you create a liaison between 2 departments that don't typically get the chance to talk to each other. It's one of the advantages of being in the same building sometimes. And I've met people that were in a training department with a budget, but just needed a subject matter expert. And I said, "Oh, I know some stuff. Can I have your budget to do training?" And they were like, "Yeah, sure, we'll help you." And it was just walking down the hallway. "Hey, what are you working on?"
Yeah, I was not shy either. If I needed information, I would ask around for who I needed to talk to. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't beyond, if it was like within a couple hour drive to a different facility or something, I would go there to go talk to somebody, because sometimes it's that important.
Yep. No, and I don't know. The silo thing, I won't say it's endemic. It's a convenient way to manage teams and organizations and disciplines and everything else. And people
be consistent, I guess. Yeah.
There's consistency. There's also, the software people do like that dark corner over there, so nobody was going to get them out of there. And I'm not being facetious. They took all the fluorescent lights out, and they had desk lamps, so the corner was dark.
They wanted it that way.
They did. And even some of them didn't like the ambient coming from the mechanical side of the building. So they put those golf umbrellas over their cubicles. I'm not kidding.
You wonder what they were talking about. If this was like just the way they liked it,
well,
or
it
if
was
they
something
were trying to, promote a facade of don't come over here and bother us.
Well, the barbed wire helped with that. Yeah, I'm kidding. We had CRT screens. We didn't have the LEDs or the screens we have today. So they had a bit of flicker to it. And the fluorescent light and looking at your screen all day long was painful.
Okay.
And so controlled the lighting so they didn't end up with that combination that just made your eyes tired after an hour or two. And there were some reasons for it, but they were just that way. So if you're listening to this and you're a software engineer, it's like, I don't get to talk to the software people that often, so it's not my fault. But
we
sure
still love you all.
Well, yeah. And it's always the last resort. If we can't solve it any other way, we hand it to the software team and say, hey, you guys can solve this, right? We launch tomorrow. It won't be a problem, right? It's just software.
It's easy.
It's easy. Yeah. But anyway, it's the silo thing is out there. And sometimes it's more embedded and controlled with moats and cannons pointing at each other's departments and stuff like that. And other times it's people take actual steps to break down those barriers and make it work better. I don't know.
Break down the barriers.
Yeah.
Be a sledge.
Yeah, that's it. And that's the solution is if you see a problem that's crossing a boundary between two silos or between two different groups, be the bridge, bring them together and say, hey, we need to solve this. Here's the issue. Here's why it's important. Don't do it for trivial stuff, but do it for stuff that really makes a difference. And you really do need input from these two silos. And most people will give you an hour to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that's all it takes.
And, like in the case with Dave, the marketing guy, he was like, wow, I'm doing this stuff and it's going to be used for all these other things too. This is awesome.
Yeah.
I think he already liked what he was doing, but then, he could see how much more he was contributing to everything. It makes a difference in people when they're working too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, that's a great one is, help somebody, the work and the effort they're doing becomes more valuable, and that's job satisfaction, but it also provides information that was sorely lacking in other parts of the organization.
Yeah.
So, there's plenty of silos out there. Some are rigid or some are flexible, but a lot of what we do is trying to get a solution, make stuff work in the engineering world. And that often takes more than one discipline or one part of this different silo groups to work together. So anyway, if you're listening to this and going, yeah, I work in one of those silos, and there's good reasons for it. I agree in some cases, but it creates barriers. And so what do you do about those barriers? How's that work for you? Let us know. Head over to accendoreliability.com/go/SOR, and you can find a couple of ways to get in touch with us. Dianna and I and the other hosts of the show are available through LinkedIn and our About pages. And we often are looking for comments and questions and to have topics to talk about in our upcoming episodes. So please get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. All right. So Dianna, I think I'm going to retire to my appointed silo.
Your corner.
My corner with with lights on.
So sometimes you just need to do that. But hey, you and I, collaborated today. So maybe that was the silo we broke down.
That's it. There's hope out there. There is hope. All right. Good talking to you, Dianna. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye, Fred.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Speaking of Reliability. We invite you to join the conversation. If you have a question or a topic that you think we should discuss in a future show, please let us know. You can find a comment box below the episode show notes, or just leave a note as part of a review on iTunes.